Well, I don't know what, no,
It's right there. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Finance, Ways and Means Committee to order for February 13th, 2024. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representatives Barrett, Boyd, Camper, Cochran, Crawford, Faison, Freeman, Gant, Garrett, Hawk, Hicks of Hawkins, Hicks of Washington, Kiesling, Lamberth, Love, Lynn, McKenzie, Miller, Moon, Parkinson, Shaw, Sparks, Whitson, Williams, Zachary, Vice Chairman Baum, Chair Lady Hazelwood. Madam
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Do we have any personal orders or announcements? I do have one. I have a constituent in the audience. He's here on a regular basis, but I will take the time to introduce him, ask him to stand up today. Hugh Morrow. He always tells everyone that in Alabama we'd be considered cousins because his cousin is married to my cousin. So welcome, Hugh. We have two budget hearings scheduled this afternoon, and we do have a regular calendar with 3 bills on it. We're going to take up those bills first, and then we will get to our budget hearings. So first on our agenda is House Bill 701, Chairman Doggett. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Doggett, I believe there's an amendment on this bill.
Yes, ma'am, it is. Amendment code is 13381.
That's the code that we have. We have a motion, I have a second. We have a motion and a second on the amendment. All in favor of adding drafting code 1033381 to the bill, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The amendment is attached. Chairman Doggett, please explain your bill as amended.
Thank you, Lady Chair. This bill adds continuous sexual abuse of a child to the list of offenses that require the defendant to be put on community supervision for life.
You've heard the sponsor's explanation. Are there questions? Seeing none, without objection, we're voting on House Bill 701. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 701 goes to calendar and rules. Thank you, Chairman Doggett.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee.
The next item on our agenda, item number 2, is House Bill 743 by Representative Mitchell. Without objection, this bill is placed on last calendar. Third bill is House Bill 1681 by Representative Stevens. We have a motion and a second. Representative Stevens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is an administration bill brought by the Department of Human Services. The bill eliminates the State Advisory Board for Community-Based Vocational Rehabilitation Services. This board is duplicative of the work being done by the gubernatorially appointed State Rehabilitation Council, and this legislation will save state funds currently used to cover the administrative cost of this board.
Are there questions of the sponsor? Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Who appoints those other boards?
Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This board that we're proposing to eliminate is appointed by the commissioner of the department.
Great, thank you.
Other questions for the sponsor? Seeing none, we are voting on House Bill 1681. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. House Bill 1681 moves to calendar and rules. Thank you, Representative Stevens. Without objection, we are now going out of session, and we will begin our hearings for today. We're going in alphabetical order, starting with agriculture. So if we would ask the Department of Agriculture. Commissioner Hatcher and your team, welcome. Glad to have you with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate this opportunity.
Is your mic on?
How about now? Yeah.
It's better, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. We appreciate this opportunity to present this proposed budget. And I have with me Deputy Commissioner Jeff, and then the physical team over here, we have Chris and Samantha. We also have in the audience, if we get down to some questions, we have some subject matter experts there we can call up if that's okay.
Thank you. And we look forward to your presentation.
Okay, so I thought I would keep this, we have slides as well, but I thought I'd keep this fairly high level and give plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to approach it that way. We are,
And members, this information is on your dashboard. Excuse me, Commissioner, go ahead.
okay. In this budget proposal, we are not requesting any new positions. In fact, since 2010, we've decreased our personnel about 14%. In this request, there's a $15 million total request for cost increases, of which 13 million of that is for the Ag Enterprise Fund, which is a cost share program that's been highly successful for us in recruiting, retaining, and increasing ag and forestry economic development in the rural counties. The balance is of the $15 million cost increase, $2 million goes for operational needs. Of the total request, 85% of this is non-recurring. The Ag Enterprise Fund has been so successful that its return on investment is $17.55. For every dollar invested, it goes into that community. And it is a cost share program. It has, we have funded projects, or 41% of the projects have been funded in distressed and at-risk counties. And in many of these rural counties, ag and forestry are the industries that are there. It's our approach that with the success of this program to invest in larger projects to have an even more economic impact and more investment in those rural communities. The one cost reduction that we have in this proposed budget is a rent savings of $113,500. That is, there's an auditorium on our campus that we're saving on rent because General Services took that building maintenance and running over. So at this point, that's the high spots, and I'll turn it over to questions at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner. We appreciate the brevity. There is, again, members, I would remind you that the information is on dashboard, as well as you should have a copy of the information that was provided earlier from the department in response to our questions from our staff. First on my list, Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lee. Thank you, Commissioner, for coming. But before I get into my questions, I did want to take an opportunity to recognize one of your colleagues, the former representative, Andy Holt, who I know you get tired of hearing his name probably as much as we do, but we're glad to have him in the room today. I will say he looks much better on that side of the dais. But But I will say I did have an opportunity earlier this year to reach out to he and your department as it relates to someone in my district who was interested in maybe bringing some new research ideas to Tennessee. And so he was very kind to help introduce through his department many of the practitioners across the state in regards to poultry and ag and hydroponics. And so I wanted to just publicly state how appreciative I am of he and your department for working with me to try to find a solution that works good for our farmers. Previously in this committee, the F&A came and they discussed some individual dollars that would be spent, new dollars. One of those was inadvertently put into TDEC for $25 million for farmland conservation process. The governor's office came to see me today a little bit about that. I was wondering maybe if you could, it was communicated then that the commissioner said that those monies would be moved in the AA to your department for the operations of those monies. I've come to find out that there are several other states that do that. I just wondered if you could kind of give us since you're performing at the 50,000 foot view today, maybe you could give us an idea of what you envision those monies to be spent towards and what a system might look like as it relates to the expenditure of those dollars.
Commissioner?
Farmland, loss of high value farmland and forestry land is, in my opinion, one of the biggest challenges that we face. Tennessee is, depending on sources, anywhere from third or second worst, if you will, in the country in loss of high value farmland. We've lost 1.1 or 1.2 million acres in 20 years, and we're projected to lose another up to 500,000 in the next 5. We just had a census briefing by USDA this morning on the 2022 census, and we've lost 10% of the farmers in the last 5 years. So it's one of the biggest challenges we have. We have looked at 2 fairly successful conservation easement programs in the United States, one being Pennsylvania. That's probably the best one in the country. They have preserved about 630,000 acres there, and it's a permanent easement, so it's a forever ever type program. And I think their cost is somewhere between $2,500 and $3,000 an acre for that. So it takes quite a bit of money to save or preserve permanently not that many acres. We would envision, we envision conservation easement program as only one of the tools in the toolbox. We're going to do our level best to provide voluntary incentives, and this would be a voluntary program as well, to incentivize farmers to keep farming that land, especially trying to convince future generations of farmers, beginning and new farmers, to do the same thing. But it would be prioritized based on, or this is the way I would envision it, would be prioritized on counties that have the most land loss, counties that are the most, or farms are most productive. We want to base it on productivity. We would bring in stakeholders and have that conversation and talk to the ag community, who's best suited to bounce ideas off of and formulate and rank those priorities so that we could develop a program. But we would lean heavily on the experiences of some of the other states and move forward in that fashion.
Representative Williams?
Thank you. I look forward to continuing the discussion as you and your team kind of formalize that. But I do think the Pennsylvania model works for them to be permanent easements. I would also venture to say that there are a large number of farms, particularly in West Tennessee, where you have farmers who are leasing land, that they're working those farms. The concern wouldn't be so much that those farmers that own the land would continue to farm it as much as those areas that were currently being leased. I would hope that as we look at those properties going forward, that we would also focus on those properties that are currently being leased, that are not operated solely by the property owner for farming purposes, with the idea that we'd be preserving those going forward. But anyways, I look forward to hearing more about those. I do think a permanent fix would be good. A ratio as to the land value for $2,500 an acre in Pennsylvania versus what that looks like here would also be a good number to see. But appreciate you answering my questions.
And Commissioner, just to help us, I guess, in perspective, you talked about the millions of acres of loss. Currently, how many acres of farmland do we have in Tennessee?
So as of 2022, 86% of the land mass, believe it or not, was ag and forestry, which seemed like a really high number to me. We're on track to lose up to 1% a year over the next 5 years. So I think the total, Jeff, if you can help me, it's, is it 11 million?
You
Can I ask?
Sure. Phone a friend.
Okay, my support in the back. Anybody know the number? Okay, 14 plus million acres.
All right, and that is ag and forestry?
Just forestry? Well, I think to make it a little bit clear, my understanding is the definition of ag land includes forestry land.
Okay.
So it's kind of merged together.
All
I
right.
do know that together it's 86% of the land mass. So if the total land mass is what? 28 million. So do the math on that. What does that get you? Both of them together, that figure?
I guess it would be helpful, and you can certainly,
Yes.
we can play with these numbers at a later date, but just, when I think about farmland, that's in a different bucket in my mind than forestry, which might not be farmable because of terrain or whatever. So if you can just help us kind of get a handle on what those numbers are. Chairman Kiesling.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great to have you with us, Commissioner. Thank you for your focus, as always, on rural Tennessee. We appreciate you so much. A veterinarian lab, ag and forestry supply chain enhancements, agriculture research and education at both TSU and UT, combined, and a meat industry workforce training facility. All 5 of these amounted to just under 150 million to your department. Commissioner, according to the Tennessee Resiliency Plan Data Dashboard, as of December 31 last year, only 2.9 had been expended. That's according to them, expended. So could you just briefly give us an update on these projects? Again, that's the veterinarian lab, the forestry supply chain enhancements, ag research and education at TSU and UT, and then finally the meat industry workforce training facility. And you're certainly welcome to bring anyone up if you need to. I think, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Certainly. we
Forgive
will,
me for taking over. I didn't mean to. Sorry. Sorry about that. Yes.
Commissioner, and if, as Chairman Kiesling has said, if you need to bring someone forward to answer any of that, then please feel free to do so. But I think we would all be interested in kind of a progress report on where those major expenditures are in the process.
Okay. Got you covered. So the money team over here, I know has those numbers.
Okay.
Samantha Wilson, Department of Agriculture. You're correct. We have 5 projects, and we are currently, although it looks like we haven't spent that much, we are still on target to obligate all our funds by December 31st, 2024, and to have them spent by December 31st, 2026. The 3 projects running through UT and TSU, they're capital projects, so they're currently in the planning phases, acquiring all the construction to get those on the way. And then we have 2 that we're handling here through our department. One, you referred to the supply chain. We call that our Farm Tough program. We have completed 3 rounds of applications so far. So we have awarded $32.3 million of that, 50 million. And we have some future applications coming available this month and next month as well. So we're working hard, and we plan to meet all our deadlines.
Chairman Kiesling.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wonderful. Great to hear that. And yeah, that was going to be part 2 of my question. Do you hope to have these funds spent by the end of 26? And it sounds as though you are. And finally, can you also just briefly explain what obstacles or challenges that you guys have met through administering these initiatives, if applicable?
I can't speak to any challenges right now. We're just working through our timeline to procure equipment and work through those construction projects with our partner agencies.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And I would just express my concern. I know you've explained that this is a process and the money will be much more backloaded than front-loaded. But we continue, all of us, to be very concerned about the possibility of not getting these funds expended in a timely manner in a way that allows us to get the usage of the dollars. So we would appreciate if there, I hear what you're saying, everything is on time and everything is great and good, but we would appreciate a heads up if that changes rather than, finding out fairly last minute, say this time next year, that we're behind the 8 ball. So I know we have to have them committed by December 31, 2 years to get it expended on construction projects. Those projects can run long. So it just makes me a bit nervous. So I appreciate just keeping an update on with us on where you are on those dollars. Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Commissioner, thank you for all the good work that you do for us across the state of Tennessee. I know your department established the Farm Cost Shared Program utilizing that $50 million in ARPA allocations to address the forestry supply chain issue. Can you give us a little bit of an update on the farm program? And I got a second part to that question, if you could.
Madam Chair, if I could, can I bring Andy Holt up here?
Certainly, Commissioner.
I was about to ask you, should I ask Andy? Because I know Andy, he's the man, yeah.
Well, he's in charge of that program.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andy Holt, Tennessee Department of Agriculture. And so Representative Shaw, an update for the farm cost share. And really, I'd like to talk about 2 different cost share programs funded through that same amount of money. So as of today, before we came into the hearing, we had our 3rd round information call for our farm cost share program that stands for forestry, agriculture, and rural markets. As was relayed earlier, we've allocated 32 million plus in the first 2 rounds. And so this last round, what we presume will be the last round, actually, there is some conversation that, much to your point, Madam Chair, that if there were funds that were allocated early on, it's become very clear that those funds may not be able to be put into use. We could actually initiate a 4th round. We'd prefer not to do that. If possible, we'd hope that all of our projects that were funded early on are able to come to fruition. But this last round, we expect another good round of applications. Each preceding round, first and second round, brought about, and I think all of us would recognize that there is a robust demand for agriculture and forestry investment in the state of Tennessee. And those projects that have been funded up to this point cover the gamut of all kinds of forestry and agricultural projects, everything from meat processing to forestry projects, lots of grain handling projects that have come online, and even some cooperatives from across the state of Tennessee that have a very large impact on a large number of producers have been funded through that farm cost share program. The other program that has also been funded with these American Rescue Plan dollars is our TUF program, which is Tennessee Urban Farm and Forest Program. We've awarded our first round of applications, and those, even though it's not been as robust, the demand has not been as robust as what we had hoped for. We're continuing to ask for folks to be engaged in that program, and really want to make sure that we can focus those dollars on Tennessee's really burgeoning, especially urban farming. Several of those dollars ended up in places all across the state. Some of the best programs that we funded actually were in Memphis. Marlon Foster's Knowledge Quest in Memphis was actually the highest scoring application that we ran across, and he's a great advocate for that program. So are there other specific issues or questions that you may have about that program?
Well, I based upon what you just told me, I should ask for
Representative Shaw.
Thank you. I assume that this has been successful and strengthening the program as intended, I would assume. You pretty well answered that. I did want to ask you, what, and maybe this would go back to the commissioner, but why you're here, because I know you know a lot about it. What do y'all think is the most challenge farmers are facing during this period of time? I would direct that to anybody.
Commissioner?
Yeah, it's been a tough several years going through the COVID years. We had good farm income the last several due to high commodity prices, but I think it's profitability. This year is not going to be that good a year. The Secretary of Ag told us that much in conversation we had with him. So you've got inflationary pressures, input costs, labor issues. It just compounds itself into a lot of stress for the farmer, both financially and mentally. So it's not easy. It's a hard way to make a living.
Representative Shaw?
Thank you. Is there any vision and looking to the future as to what farmers can do to get back to a comfortable place? I know we got to eat. I know we got to do that. Is there any vision from the department that maybe you all may be looking at this point in time that would say, we want to make you successful again?
Yeah,
Commissioner?
absolutely. I think we're well on the road to doing that. Tennessee, in my opinion, is made the best use of federal funds of any state in the country, especially as related to agriculture and forestry. We've poured it in large amounts into ag and forestry economic development in farming and forestry communities, and that's made a big difference. To make it in farming today, you got to do one of three things. Some people do combination. You do economies of scale, diversification, or value added. Those are great equalizers, and you can do a combination of those. But in the end, you have to be profitable. But we've got really three groups of farmers. We've got farmers that gross over $350,000, those that gross under $350,000, and those that are just kind of like have other jobs and just grow tomatoes or have a small farming operation. So how can we leverage that and attract new and beginning farmers into those into farming to get into farming is going to be through all the tools we have available. It may be part of it will be conservation easements. Part of it will be training and education and mentorship programs and cost share programs. But Tennessee is killing it based on cost share programs and federal use of money and ag education. We're doubling down on 4-H and FFA. We've added the 6 new positions to the Tennessee Department of Agriculture. That's reaping huge dividends going all the way to elementary school. So if we can start early and start educating children on food and fiber and opportunities that's in that industry, that's going to go a long ways. And it's still the largest and most important industry in the state of Tennessee. And we got to hang our hat on it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, your team, I appreciate you being here and of course, served with the gentleman to your right, but the gentleman to your left, actually, Mr. Aiken, I represent his in-laws, so I got to make sure that they stay happy, and just as much as he has to make sure his in-laws stay happy as well. So, Jeff, it's great to have you here. Commissioner, you touched on the Agricultural Enterprise Fund a little bit in your initial comments, but the $1 that we're investing in the $17.50 return to our economy. Can you help me out a little bit? You're asking $13 million non-recurring on this fund. We've invested over $113 million in the last 5 years on that. Tell me how many people are being served, and is it wise to continue this in a non-recurring basis, or are we thinking about making these dollars recurring to keep this program in perpetuity as we look at that? But just the Ag and Enterprise Fund, give us a 30,000-foot view of that, please, sir.
Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm going to turn some of that to Andy, but yeah, our preference would be, it's been so successful. We continue to have so many applicants. We need more money and we need it to be recurring, but the current tax revenue situation just doesn't allow for that. And we're okay with that. We need to continue to prove ourselves and prove how important and how successful the program is. And I think it'll come. Did you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for that chairman call out there. Great question. A lot of things I want to say in response to it. So for this $1 of investment and a $17.55 return, it sounds ridiculous. And sometimes I even struggle with it, but that is a study that was conducted for us by the University of Tennessee Ag Economics Department. We need to update that study, and I would expect that it will still be a strong showing. It may not be $17.55 that it once was, but these funds that we've asked for over the last couple of years have really been to address a couple of different things. And if I can, I'd like to speak about our partners and our friends with the Economic Community Development. We deal with them very often, but in your question you posed, how many people is this impacting, and what are the tangibles associated with this? So with ECD, oftentimes, their focus is on how many jobs are being brought to a community or how much capital expense is being invested in certain types of investments. Our approach is a little different. And that's where sometimes we think that we, by all means, are never going to be in a position to compete with ECD. And we recognize that's not anything that we need to do, but we can sometimes supplement the work that ECD does. They're not able to incentivize agriculture projects the way that they can oftentimes other projects, because projects in agriculture and forestry typically create a lot less jobs per dollar than other types of investments. And so for us, we're able to utilize these dollars from the Ag Enterprise Fund to incentivize projects that otherwise may not be incentivized if they were going through the route of being incentivized with ECD. And so I think that my concern about this emerging issue that we would see over the last couple of years, and had a conversation with Commissioner Hatcher, and he was able to secure these dollars for us. We would like to see them on a recurring basis, but we recognize, again, as the commissioner stated, that the budget's really a little weaker than maybe what we had hoped it would be. And hopefully that'll turn around pretty quick. But hey, we're in front of Finance Ways and Means. I'm sure we'd take the money in a recurring status if that's the way you would see to contribute it to us. But I can tell you those dollars are being invested in projects that are having an impact on rural communities, similar to the ones that you represent in East Tennessee and in several of the other places that, there's always going to be ag and forestry in the distressed and at-risk counties. There may not be large manufacturers who are moving to those areas, but we know with certainty that agriculture and forestry are going to be represented in those areas, and we're trying to bolster that as much as we possibly can with these investments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was just going to state somewhat sarcastically, technically all the dollars in the budget are non-recurring until this body gets a hold of it and does what we do. But just the investment that we're making, it looks like it's making good sense. And as you have some further information to follow up with us on that, I would really appreciate to see how that dollar turns over in our economies. And it's in the teens, obviously. It may not be the $17 we're talking about, but that means a lot. And thank you very much for the handout that you gave us about the Ag Enhancement Program. I couldn't help but notice Greene County is number one in terms of the number of paid projects since 2005. I couldn't help but notice that. So I appreciate y'all. Somebody's got to be number one. It just happened to be Greene County. So thank you, Madam Chair.
This is a bit off topic, but while we're talking about the future of farming, could any of you care to speak to, just at a high level, agritourism, how that is impacting, or if it's making an impact on farmers in the state?
Well,
Commissioner.
yeah. it's what I consider, it's a value-added proposition. So you already have the farm, the investment in that. So if you can add that, it really works well. It diversifies the operation. It educates the community and the people that come there. It's win-win. We're doing our level best to increase that. We're leveraging our Pick Tennessee Products program. We have engaged with Commissioner Ezell in the Department of Tourism, because tourism is tourism, whether it's ag or otherwise. And we're doubling down on our efforts to work together to increase it.
And do you see that as a significant contributor to farm income going forward, or is it always going, you think, more of an ancillary piece?
No, I think it's one of the great equalizers for an income potential. So I think it'll be attractive to new and beginning farmers to see that opportunity to have agritourism on their farm. It engages with the public. It increases your customer base. It sells your product. It's an educational effort as well. And it's a workforce development tool. So yeah, it's going to be key in the success of Tennessee agriculture moving forward.
Thank you. Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have a few questions. Am I allowed to? have a few?
You may.
Okay. Good evening, afternoon. Good to see y'all. Thank you for what you do. First question I have is about the Farm to Tap. That seemed to me to be a good program. If I remember, Commissioner, we put maybe around 400,000 in it. Last week we had the craft brewers here. Seemed like the program was going well. That does sunset. Is that something we as a legislature says, you know what, that was a benefit to Tennessee. That was a benefit to farmers, making that partnership grow. Is that something that we should consider keeping going?
Yes, I think so. That's another way you can add value to, we've taken the efforts to promote farm products and how they can be used in value-added products, and that's just another way to do it. So that's so anything we can do to add value to food or grapes or that farm setting or bring people in is just all the better. Andy, you want to address the Farm to Tap a little more?
So one of the interesting things about Farm to Tap is, you would think that it's just funding just breweries with some type of incentive, but the issue is that it really bolsters the supply chain up and down the brewer. So what we've seen as a result of Farm to Tap is that there's been a lot more of a search for local artisan grains. And there's also been a pursuit to add in the production of what we consider to be cover crops, which are something that maybe you're familiar with, maybe you're not. But fallow ground oftentimes in erodible soils is often covered with a crop that's considered to be a green manure. A lot of times, in essence, you may grow a certain type of grass, and that grass may be killed prior to maturity. And it's an effort really to hold together the soil to make sure that it doesn't erode. Well, this opportunity that's come about as a result of Farm to Tap has lended itself to saying, well, why, instead of raising this crop that doesn't come to fruition, why don't we raise barley, or why don't we raise some other type of artisan grain? And then actually from that pursuit, we've also seen the addition of other grains where farmers have come to realize that there's this new and emerging market for these specialty grains that now it's not only going into the brewing industry, but also into the baking and specialty flour industries as well. We have more calls and more conversations about specialized grains, which bring about an entire new opportunity for revenue to producers who may have never even had that as an option to put that crop in on their farm. So from this one program, we see the tentacles sort of continuing to grow across the state, create new opportunity, not only for brewers, but also for farmers, and then also for consumers, that they have the opportunity to have these products. And I think, not Representative Faison, not that you spend a lot of time downtown or anything, but I would say that you probably have seen some opportunities for local breweries to market their product to the very large number of folks that frequent Nashville as tourists. And it's been an opportunity that's been very successful for everybody involved.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Next question. Last year, the Public Chapter 423 tasked the Department of Revenue and the Department of Agriculture with regulating the sale and distribution of hemp-derived cannabinoid products. To offset the costs associated with this regulation, additional 6% sales tax is applied to those products, which proceeds split evenly between the Department of Revenue and Agriculture. We learned yesterday that it's bringing around $1 million a month. So knowing that, providing, if you can you give us an overview of the department's role in license and overseeing the product since the enactment of Public Chapter 423?
Yeah, so that's a big question. We have or developing a cannabis section. We realize those dollars are coming. And I think I can pass that to Samantha or Chris to talk about the money aspect of how those tax dollars will be used, if I may.
Yes, so you're correct. As of now, we're only collecting that sales tax revenue. We get 3% of that 6% that you referenced there. We don't go into the inspection, process of it, though, until July 1st. So those revenues are building up to help us staff up, help train, and get those programs on the ground running on July 1st.
Keeping with that, do y'all have a record of how many licenses have been issued to the suppliers and the retailers? And additionally, obviously, we know in this space there can be some bad actors. Have you denied license to anybody that would potentially be a bad actor? So how many for retailers, suppliers?
Madam Chair, can I ask? Adam, do you know by chance? Or Annie? Can?
Just introduce yourself for the record, and then we're happy to have your input. Thank you. Microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect. My name is Annie Bulgetti. I'm Associate Counsel at the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, and I've been working with our Consumer and Industry Services Division on the rulemaking for the hemp rulemaking. Consumer and Industry Services are developing the program. We don't yet have it in place. We will be established by July 1st to issue licenses. So we haven't issued any licenses yet, but we will be accepting applications.
Chairman Feason.
Thank you. And this will be my final. Can you look at the 3% that y'all are getting? Is that enough to cover the operating costs for the Department of Ag?
In addition to that 3%, we do have ability to charge fees and licenses when we do establish the program. So we're hoping between the two funds that will cover it.
All right. Leader Cochran.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Appreciate all of you being here. Thank you, Commissioner Hatcher. And so last year we enacted a state meat inspection program. And so hopefully to enable more meat production in Tennessee, give our state more autonomy and honestly, and just in times of crisis, right, the ability to produce more if we need to do that. Tell me about that program. How is that since that has been established? Can you give us an update?
Yes. So we have, it's a long process when you develop a state meat inspection program from scratch. We consulted the state of Arkansas that did the same thing about 3 years ago. And so the first step, and we can do this without any additional funding because we got none. We just kind of felt like we can't charge enough to these small processors to make a program run on the fees from the licenses. So we're going to need some more money to actually build a state meat inspection program equivalent to states of our size. But anyhow, the first step is working with FSIS. You have to develop a MOU so that you are same as or equal to the USDA inspection program. And that generally takes a year to a year and a half. We're on the verge of having a MOU ready, and we're working with FSIS on that now. So we're getting closer to that point. And then there's other steps after that. Then you have to stand up your inspection team, and then you, once you start inspections, then you can draw some money from the federal government.
Okay, thank you. Chair Lady, just a couple others. In your questionnaire to this committee, Agriculture indicated that there were 61 vacancies in your department in fiscal year 22-23. And then this last fiscal year, that the number of vacancies increased to 66. 14 of those were vacant for longer than a year. Can you tell us, what are those positions? Are you actively recruiting for them? And then a specific, definitely the ones that have been vacant for a year. Just tell us more about that situation.
Madam Chair. Yep. So I'll start on that, and then I'll pass it to the money people over there to give you the exact numbers. So we have come a long way in compensation. I mean, like 2 years ago, we would have a register and no applications. Now we're getting, in some cases, over 100 for a single position. So we've come a long way. So some of those vacancies we just couldn't fill them, couldn't even give them the applicant. We've improved a lot, and I think the updates on those numbers are really encouraging. So we're in a way better place than what you may have the latest numbers on.
Hi there, this is Chris Eaton. I'm Chief Financial Officer at the Department of Revenue. We've seen a big decrease in our unfilled positions. And I think a lot of that is attributable to what y'all have done in giving us the additional money, class compensation last year. A lot of those were positions that we had tried to fill for years. They'd remained vacant. And as soon as those salaries came up a little bit, we were able to fill a bunch of those positions across multiple sections of the department. So I think that's helped us greatly. We're also doing some initiatives where we're combining some part-time positions that are that right now there are 2 positions, and we'll combine them down to 1 and hire a full-time position. That's mostly in our forestry division. So I think what y'all have done has been great, and it's helped us tremendously in terms of vacancies.
Okay, so can you give me a number? So we were at 66. What are we at now?
I'm sorry, I don't have it with me. I will get that for you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sorry.
If you just get that to us, then in our office, we'll share with the committee. And while we're talking about vacancies, and I would hope that the salary market rate adjustments and the other increases that we've done have, as you said, have improved your hiring capabilities. What about turnover and attrition rates? Has there been any changes with those numbers?
We have seen the turnover rate go down just because of those salaries, and then also just having a greater plan for retention.
Can you speak to us a little bit about those retention plans?
We've just invested in more training, just having more of kind of a, I apologize, I'm not HR, but just we've made it our front thinking that we don't want that turnover, because what we do, especially out in the field, is very important when it comes to inspections or testing things for our consumers. But I'm happy to send more when we send over those numbers to you as well.
All right, thank you. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I know I'm out of order, but I have a couple of my favorite constituents that have come in, Mr. Brandon Hessen and Mark Kimball from Gallatin Department of Electricity. So thank you, guys. Y'all stand up and please make them feel welcome. Thank you, guys. They are also in my Rotary Club. It meets Thursday at noon, which I miss a lot of times while we're in session. And Brandon is the president right now. So just two fine gentlemen. Appreciate y'all being here today.
Always glad to meet fellow Rotarians. And we're glad that you keep the power on for Leader Lamberth, that he doesn't have to take on that role all by himself, which we're all confident he could do. Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I have about 3 questions myself. Speaking of agritourism, how would legal marijuana grow benefit the agriculture economy in Tennessee?
Madam Chair, can I? Do what? Boy, that's a tough question. Other states have struggled with that. I know Alabama, at least they legalized medical marijuana, and they've had all kinds of issues. Some of the other states, even recreational. So it depends upon how the program's set up. I mean, you would think that it should benefit farmers, but in some states it hasn't turned out that way. So it's got a potential of being a boom for growers and farmers, but that's not a given.
Thank you for that. You look very uncomfortable answering that question. I mean,
Was it that obvious?
Yeah, honestly, either it would benefit, our agriculture economy, or it wouldn't. Adding an additional crop to our agriculture economy. Thank you. I don't want to put you on the spot any further. Let me ask you this: what are we doing? I know we had you when we were having a conversation about farmland and the shrinking farmland in Tennessee. What are we doing to encourage vertical growth?
Commissioner.
And if we're not doing anything, that's fine. Let's do something. Yeah.
Well, you're talking about vertical market integration. So that's a lot of value-added farms are doing that. So they do everything from the producing of the crop to the processing to the marketing to the distribution to the retail and all that. So that's a growing component of the ag industry. We work with University Extension, and we work with Center of Profitable Agriculture. They actually have classes and they teach on value-added products. We have the Pick Tennessee Products Conference coming up that's going to be doing the similar where farmers get together and learn about value-added opportunities and what they can do for agritourism. They've got speakers that come in from experts from all over the country. So we're doing a number of things to try to promote vertical integration, because that's really how the farmer captures its highest part of that food dollar.
Well, I appreciate your answer, but what I'm talking about is utilizing buildings and growing internally, vertically, versus that on traditional farmland.
Okay.
But I appreciate your original answer.
Okay, well, I'll go with that one too.
Right.
I gotta
Do we
answer
have
that.
anything that incentivizes that also? That
Yep.
incentivizes vertical growth,
So-
and
so,
especially in urban areas, possibly?
So for several years, we've recognized there's opportunities in urban areas with food deserts and so on. And there's, food insecurity doesn't matter whether it's rural or urban. It's in different places. So that's why we wanted to dedicate a certain amount of these dollars, these federal dollars, to urban settings. And so, Andy, if you could address how the TUF program is addressing some of that and some of the interactions we've had with some of these vertical integration companies.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So indoor climate controlled vertical agriculture is one of the areas that I get more calls about, not only from other states, but from other nations actually, who are interested in doing business here in Tennessee. And that's for a number of different reasons. So we have been monitoring, the commissioners had a real specific interest in a couple of indoor operations. App Harvest is one that specifically got a lot of recognition over the last couple of years. Unfortunately, App Harvest as a vertical indoor grower has not been very profitable. And so as a result, just like with all industries, many times early adopters of technology take the brunt of the lack of profitability associated with those types of production. And so as a result of that, I think there's a lot of refining processes that are going on right now with indoor climate controlled vertical agriculture, but that really addresses as much as anything is what specific crops can be grown indoors. So the advancements in indoor crop production are continuing to be amazing each and every day. But some of the projects that we specifically have worked on within the last couple of years actually is strawberry production indoor mushroom production. We've also had indoor tomato, indoor cucumber, indoor lettuce, and other types of greens. So there's a lot of interest from outside groups to come here. And you may ask yourself, well, why do all these companies have so much specific interest in Tennessee? And it's for a number of different reasons as well. So actually, the topography of East Tennessee lends itself to a certain angle of light that actually is a more profitable light to actually grow certain types of vegetation. So in addition to that, we also have this extremely wonderful, all of us recognize this, infrastructure that allows for interstate transfer of goods in a very short order. We always say that we can access 75% of the U.S. population within a 1 day's drive in most places from within Tennessee. So to answer your question, yeah, we do have cost share programs that Commissioner Hatcher's referenced. That could be Ag Track, which is a new program that we're bringing online. Actually, applications will close on March the 31st. Also, this farm and these tough programs that we've spoken about, and also Ag Enterprise Fund. All of those can be used to help fund projects similar to what you're talking about. And if you're familiar with any specific projects that we should be in touch with, I'm happy to reach out to them, because I do think that Tennessee is going to really be on the map for these types of growing operations in short order.
Okay. And that last question, you mentioned that farmers were having challenges with labor. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Why we're having the labor issues?
Madam Chair. Yeah, so farmers are not immune and I don't know all the factors, but I mean, we have the lowest unemployment rate in history, but still it's difficult at times to hire people to do certain things. And frankly, when the farmer, if they can buy a piece of equipment that'll take the place of a person, they're starting to do that. And then you bring in artificial intelligence into the picture, then wow, there's lots of opportunities and lots of challenges there too. But I still hear that almost everywhere I go is one of the biggest challenges is labor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Gant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Andy, it's good to see you. And before I ask my question, I'm going to brag on you for a quick second and thank you for your calls that you made to some of my mayors in my district, talking about the grants and how they work and how they can better qualify for some of those grant opportunities. So thank you for going the extra mile and talking to some of the mayors in my district and explaining how they would, qualify for some of those grants. Thank you. My main question is around solar farms and the number of solar farms that we're seeing across the state and the impact that it's not only going to have now, but for generations and years to come, if we continue to allow this to take away from the farmers' land that would be able to actually grow crops on. Are we concerned about this and the trajectory that it's currently on and how this is going to affect the generational farmers that we hope continue to farm?
Well, you guys ask the difficult questions, don't you? Yes, I think the farming community in general is very concerned about it, from the Farm Bureau to the farmers in West Tennessee, to East, and everywhere in between. That conversation's ongoing. There's people on both sides of that issue. I think what's most concerning is what we don't want to do is take productive land out of production and put solar panels on it. It's one thing to put them on roofs and unusable land and that you're not currently producing on, but it's a different thing to take the entire farm and put it into solar panels. But that's in the end, it's probably going to be pushed back to the counties and the local governments to try to sort that out. But it's going to be it's an ongoing challenge, and it's happening on a regular basis now that some farms are going out of production into solar production, out of regular traditional agriculture into solar production. So
Thank you, Madam Chair. So is there any plans to bring any regulatory reform to this process around solar farms? I mean, where are we at on this? Because I was a county commissioner for several years, and when I left, this was one of the things that we were grasping at straws on, how to not only either allow or not allow, but also the perpetuation plan of, if one of those solar farms goes in default, what's the perpetuation plan for cleanup for years to come?
I'm going to pass it to Deputy Commissioner Jeff.
Jeff Aiken. Representative, I will say the agriculture community struggles with calling them solar farms because we think there's a disconnect between agriculture and these solar operations. I'm not sure what the proper terminology is, but we think that solar farm may not be it. But to your question about regulation, it's our understanding that there's a TASA report that is out that would make some recommendations as to how to address these challenges and concerns moving forward. And I think we're anxiously awaiting to see what this body does with that report.
But as far as you sit right there, you're not coming forth with any future recommendations dealing with solar farms?
Today? No.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Piggybacking off of my colleague from West Tennessee, some of my question was answered with his question on the regulations. I too am a former recovering county commissioner, and it's been, I guess it's a statewide issue and everybody's concerned about it. But he was bringing up the solar side of it. I want to bring up the wind side of it. Talking to other farmer friends of mine and stuff, I have been basically told that if you put the windmills that generate the power and stuff on your farm, that it definitely has an effect on your crops. And so I guess I'm asking you guys, is there, as Ron did, any regulations or anything, any ideas that you guys have that we can work on to make sure that the productive land, as you called it there, stays productive and we don't tie it up with some of these power situations?
Yeah, so this discussion is going to be ongoing, and across the United States. I mean, we're talking about these same issues at our national state departments of agriculture conferences and meetings, and it's an ongoing conversation. I think generally, I think Jeff is right. Generally, most farmers don't like the terminology solar farms. They see it as more of a manufacturing facility or something different. And the same thing for wind. I mean, you got people on both sides. Now we did had some tours of some western farms a few months ago, and some of them had made the jump and had some wind turbines and windmills on their farms, and we're okay with it. But it's, I think wherever y'all go is going to be based on what the ag community thinks and what your constituents think, and have to work through the process. And we're going to be doing the same though, as far as the people that we serve.
Commissioner, in the beginning of your remarks, you talked about the dwindling farmland and the amount that is being lost. Did those numbers include land that's being transferred from traditional farming to these solar operations?
That is a good, I think it's any use other than ag, which probably would not include solar, but I can get back with you on that.
If you would just confirm that. All right. Well, thank you. We've had,
So if I could make a comment related to the questions about wind and solar, agriculture has the ability to produce energy, and we're not opposed to energy production. But when we're talking about farmland loss, we have a concern about our ability for food production moving into the future. And I would tell you, I think this department, that's our role, is to ensure a safe, abundant food supply for all Tennesseans. We want to make sure that we do that first and foremost. If there's a way to do it and still produce energy, we're good with that. We would say to this body, if you have a willingness to have conversations concerning this topic, we're open and willing, and would like to have a dialogue with you.
thank you for that. I think you can tell from the questions that were presented today that there is an interest and a concern about that among this body, and I'm sure among our legislative body as a whole. But I do want to thank you for taking an ample amount of time with us this afternoon, and we appreciate your presentation. Again, Commissioner, I think you mentioned in your opening remarks, but agriculture remains the #1 industry in Tennessee. It is critically important to our economy for all sorts of reasons, not the least of which is, to Mr. Aiken's point, farmers feed us all. So it's critical, and the role that your department plays in that is critical as well. So we thank you for your work in that regard. We look forward to having the information that you weren't able to provide today just at the tip of your fingers, and we'll share that, as I mentioned, with the committee as a whole. But thank you for being with us. We're going from A to T alphabetically. We're going to ask for the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency to come forward, please. That's what he said. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us. Sorry we kept you a little bit over time, and we always like to recognize our former colleague, and I suppose still friend, Mr. Bell. Happy to have you in front of us today. We have a lot of it's a day for former colleagues on the Hill. But without further ado, we'll just ask that you all get into your presentation and let us know what's happening with TWRA and your budget, and the things that you've requested, what you plan to do with those dollars, and any dollars you weren't allocated that you would have like to speak to us about as well. So please go ahead.
All right. We're good.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Madam Chair, I always like to remind my House friends, I'm a former House member as well. I spent 4 years in the House as well. So
We're still recovering from that. Yes,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I am Mike Bell, the Legislative Director for the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency. And to my right is Ken Tarkington, who is our Budget Chief. And next to him is Frank Fisk, who's our Deputy Director over Business Operations. Then our Director, who I'll turn it over to here in a minute, is Jason Maxidon. And next to him is Brandon Ware, our Deputy Director over Field Operations. So that's who we have with you today to make the presentation. We appreciate this opportunity, and I'll turn it over to Director Maxidon.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Thank you first for just allowing us to be able to come in and present to you today. As you all know, we're a little different than the other executive branches in the way that our budget functions and operates. I kind of want to take just a minute and kind of go through that and remind you, put this presentation together last year because I think we are a little bit different. And the main thing is we live off what we make. The other thing is we get federal funds that match our license dollars, which makes us a little bit different in that aspect as well. So kind of want to go over those operating funds. There's 3 different funds that we operate. It's the Wildlife Fund, the Boating Fund, and then the Wetlands Fund. The main thing to take home about that is we can't commingle those funds between the Wildlife and the Boating Fund. And then we do have a reserve in each of those. Some of the things that we spend those on, just to tell you a little bit about those. In our Wildlife Fund, it's made up of the income that comes in is 40% of the sale of hunting and fishing licenses. 35% of that is federal reimbursement. That's through, most of you have heard of the Pittman-Robertson or the Dingell-Johnson Act. That's where there's an excise tax put on the sale of hunting and fishing and angling, hunting and fishing products and angling products. And so that's a big portion of our budget that really helps us. A lot of people that are driving what's done in the conservation field are actually folks that get out and shoot. That's where a biggest part of this funding is coming in now. Turns out a lot of those are female shooters too, so we're pretty excited about that. The 25% is state and other funds. Those would be things like crop share leases. We have crop share leases that are on TWRA properties. Some of the examples in your districts, how these things function, just to be able to tell a little bit about those. Many of you have wildlife management areas that are either in your district or close to you, and those funds are expended to put in things like food plots or food crops or manage roads. A lot of these areas are also used by folks that don't buy a hunting and fishing license. They can go out and do birding or other things such as that. Enforcement, all of you know what our wildlife officers look like. That's the face of the agency that most people see. That money's put towards enforcement work that our wildlife officers are out doing on the ground. Something you may not know is we fund a lot of shooting ranges across the state. We have 4 manned ranges ourselves. We have several that are unmanned, just where folks can go to a WMA and say, sight in a deer rifle. But we also grant funds to private entities as long as they will allow 20 hours a week to the public to come in there. We will grant them funds to put in a private shooting range. Obviously, we want to try to get these folks engaged in that. That second fund is boating. 47% of the income comes in from boat registrations, 15% from federal reimbursement, and then 38% from the gasoline tax there. Some project examples are safety and education. You know, the demographics of our state are changing a lot. We're getting a lot of folks on the water that have never been on the water before. They've never operated any type of watercraft. So we're having to do more work than we've ever done to educate people on just typical navigation rules. And that takes some enforcement work that comes along with that. Something that we get a lot of requests on from many of you and many county mayors is access, water access in your districts. And we have many access areas across the state to the tune of about 700 and something with all of our partners that we go in and maintain and try to provide access to waterways across the state. The last one is the Wetlands Fund, and that's a portion of the real estate transfer tax. We get 3.25% on 100, and some of the things that we use that for is to purchase, obviously, wetland tracts of property, but also maintenance of TWRA properties. Endowments, one key thing to pay attention to about endowments, we can only spend the interest off of these. We've got the watchable wildlife. There's about 7.3 million in there. Again, we can only spend the interest off that. And then the Lifetime Sportsman Endowment, you all were gracious enough, the General Assembly was last year, to be able to allow us to spend some funds out of that Lifetime Endowment. So anything from last year moving forward,
we can actually use that money, where prior to that, we were only able to spend the interest off of that. You might say, how does that help us? Well, we were lumped into that compensation package for our employees, which we were excited about, but we didn't budget for that, and we didn't get any appropriations to pay those employees. So this actually allowed us, or has helped us, where we don't have to tap in so much into our reserves to be able to utilize some of these funds. So go back to the three main funds. We have reserves for those. Folks will look at our budget and say, well, y'all have plenty of money. That's not the case. If you look at the operating costs in the wildlife fund, there's 63.9 million. That's really only 7 months of operating cost. And the boating fund is 17.3 million. That's really only 12 months of operating cost. And then the wetlands fund is 19.2. That's 12 months. These reserves are critical to us. I mean, we're having to tap into those to the tune of about 4 to 5 million a year now, with all the compensation that came for our employees. We've got to have these funds to be able to get the federal match. We got to have these funds to have program consistency in there. So we must have the reserves to spend in order to be reimbursed through those federal grants. So this is the request that's before you today, and that wildlife fund is $113,299,000, $17,846,800 in the boating, and then $18,055,900 in the wetland. So the total is going to be $149,201,700. And Madam Chair, the last thing is, this is 75 years of conservation that we're celebrating in our state. In 1949, the General Assembly actually set up what was originally called the Tennessee Game and Fish Commission. It was later reorganized in 1974 to the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. We're very thankful for you all passing that in the way that this is organized. Just wanted to say thank you. Be watching this year. For the celebration, we're going to have several things that will come throughout the year. But the main thing is there's been a lot of species of wildlife that have been brought back that were imperiled. So again, thank you for establishing us the way that we're set up. Madam Chair, that concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Director. Just a quick question. When you mentioned the, like the Watchable Wildlife Fund, for instance, with the $7.3 million, you're only allowed to use the interest off of that fund. If you don't expend that interest in a given year, does that money go back into the base?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Representative Freeman, you're first on my list.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Director. Thank you for all you do as a lifelong Tennessean and avid outdoorsman. You've improved the quality of life for me and my family. My children are eaten up with fishing, and to get 3-4 hours captive in a boat with them is time that I'll remember for the rest of my life. So I appreciate you for continually improving that. Thanks. And we talked a little bit about the Bill Dance Signature Lake program back in December of 21, and we made a $15 million investment into the for that program. This year's budget contains 4.7 from dedicated funds for a concession building at New Herb Parsons Lake in Fayette County, and an additional $10 million in state funding to TDEC to expedite the Signature Lake initiative. Will you be collaborating with TDEC in the distribution of that $10 million across the 18 lakes? Will TWRA use reserve funds for this initiative? And if so, how much? And how much, if any, has been used of those reserves to date?
Okay, so yes, sir. I'll start with collaboration. Yes, we are collaborating with TDEC and have been. So TDEC, the Department of Tourism, and TWRA have all been instrumental in getting this project started since 2019. And to date, I think these figures are pretty close, but we originally agreed, Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency originally agreed to spend $6.1 million. That was kind of the commitment we made in 2019. I think tourism was going to spend about 2.4, and state parks was going to spend about 6.9. Obviously, we all know what happened in 2020 with the way that expenses and everything went up. They kind of sailed out the roof. So we all got back to the table, started looking at the projects, and a lot's happened since 2019. We obviously have got an icon's name on this project, Bill Dance, and we wanted this to be the best that it could be. And so several things have been added, and that came with a cost increase along with what it cost for prices of everything to go up. So when we went back to the drawing board, we felt like that was going to be more like 25 million spread across us. And some of that money is going to come from TDEC because some of these Bill Dance lakes are going to be on their properties. And so the funds will, the 10 million ask was gone back to you all to come for a $10 million ask. So some of those funds will be dispersed to us to manage our properties, and then some of those funds will be dispersed to TDEC to manage theirs.
Okay. So, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but can you give an update on what we've done so far? What your role has been, and talk a little bit about the challenges and anything that could be improved that we can help you with.
So we've done a lot of underwater work on our properties and also on TDEC properties. And so we put a lot of fish structures out there. So we've gone out and made these makeshift structures, put them out in all those lakes. And TWRA actually expended that out of our reserves. They're coming out of TWRA's budget. Also put fish feeders out, fish attractors. We've also supplemented by stocking a lot of these lakes already, stocking them with game fish and also with bait fish. TDEC has actually worked on some of their areas. We've both done ramp improvements to areas. We've done parking lot improvements. This next phase will actually be going vertical. We're working with Stream. We're going to go in and do bathroom facilities at some of those. That's what the 4.7 million is for at Herb Parsons, is to be able to put building facilities like concessionaire and bathroom facilities there.
Well, thank you. And I know I speak for a lot of Tennesseans. I can't wait for this to get up and running. I really think this is going to be we talked about agritourism. This is going to be a great tourist driver for our state to get people to come in and enjoy the signature lake series. And I'm making a wager that I think we're going to have other states copying us after this. It's going to be a great one. So thanks again for your leadership.
Thank you for that, sir.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. It's good to see you again, not in camo. Last time I think I saw most of you, you were with the rabbit sheriff over here. He wouldn't like it if I didn't call him by my favorite nickname. But I wanted to ask you about the endowment fund. You talked about transferring those funds back in 2022. You guys have been operating a little bit with those funds. I guess my question to you is that since the transfer of those funds, I may have misheard you incorrectly, but are you using those funds for operational dollars? If not, what are we spending those resources on as it relates to the transfers from the $71.5 million transfer that we did in 22? Could you share with me a little bit again, maybe what that's being spent on?
Yeah, we actually, and I misstated earlier, we actually haven't expended any of that money yet.
Okay.
We've been able to expend the interest off of that before, but you all passed that where we could. We're working with the treasurer now. And Frank, I want you to kind of give an update on the treasurer because I didn't make the last meeting with the treasurer. If you don't mind, update on that.
I'll do that. I'm Frank Fisk, Deputy Director of Business Operations. And yeah, the law says that it will be transferred, but it has not been transferred yet. We are still trying to establish the fund, and we're working closely with the Treasury Department to get that trust document built. We've identified the money that needs to be moved there, and we haven't touched it since this has all started happening. Actually, it's invested very heavily in the bond market right now, so we really don't want to move it at their recommendation right away. So we're kind of in a pause mode as that trust document is built, and then it will be the whole amount will be moved over, and we will look forward to getting funds from that and from that trust to support our operations.
Thank you. I'm a little bit concerned to hear that hadn't happened yet. I recognize the trust, we are investing monies in the bond markets. And of course, it's an interesting market rate right now. The Treasury doing a great job of getting us a really good return on our investment, but because they're in those long-term bonds, it might make it much difficult to do that. Was there any expectation in your discussion with the Treasurer's office about the transfer of those funds and when you might expect it to be able to be transferred?
Yeah, I can't speak for a timeline on. I do have a draft trust document on my desk, so we're making progress. We just need to take the next steps. So your point's taken.
Thank you. Would be remiss as you guys know, I like to spend a little bit of my free time on the Caney Fork. I know you guys have been in partnership a little bit with the Corps as it relates to a real management plan as it relates to what's going on there. Was my hope that we'd find one of the 6 plans that they had suggested for the Caney Fork as it relates to the management of that wildlife area. I would be remiss if I didn't say that in the years that I've been fishing the Caney Fork, the quality of the stream and the fishery there is depleted dramatically over the last 3 years. I'm really concerned about it. I think what we need is some consistency. I know that when I talk to your stakeholders, you want the same thing. But at one point in time, 12 years ago, that was one of Tennessee's greatest watersheds and fisheries for people to come fish. And now it's not anything like it was 12 years ago, much less what it was like 3 years ago. So hopefully you guys will be able to work with the Corps, get some steady movement of water out there, some consistency to get the water temperature down and the oxygen level up so we can see that river thrive again. So thank you very much.
Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. I have a few questions, if that would be all right, ma'am. First question I have is about the Wetlands Acquisition Fund. A portion of that real tax collection is deposited into the Wetlands Acquisition Fund. The tax all record collections in 21 and 22. However, in 23 and 24, the dates they have shown decreases compared to the previous years. Can you give me a brief explanation of or an overview of the decreases, why we've had them, and what the agency is planning on doing to increase those?
So, and we actually expend those to buy land is what we do with it. So we're going in and buying wetlands tracts, and then we also expend those funds to be able to do maintenance on those wetlands tracts. And Ken, I may look at you for some of the difference in the expenditures as far as the decrease in the wetlands money. I'm assuming it's from the amount that's coming in. Are you talking about the overall or what we've expended on those?
Well, I was just noticing the how much it had decreased, but apparently what you're saying there is, I guess, an easier question would be, what is your plans for new acquisitions?
We're currently, so we don't necessarily go out and pursue property. Obviously, we only buy from willing sellers, but we've got a strategic plan where we look to see what properties based on the species that are there, species of greatest conservation need, species that our hunters and anglers would want to hunt and fish for. And if it's typically something that joins us and it's a willing seller and we can purchase that with wetlands acquisition dollars, we will try to go after it. It's mainly marginal land. We do get some good land every now and then, but not very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. The other thing I wanted to go to, this happened back in December, but I heard, and there was an article on the website about an elk being poached up in Claiborne County. I wanted to know if that's an issue that we're seeing across the state, or just that one particular instance that we've had, or are we having problems with poaching?
We do, and usually it's about one a year or one every couple of years. So yes, sir, that does occur.
Okay. What are we doing to keep that from happening, especially on the elk herd population?
So like, for example, this year, obviously we go out and try to investigate that, and we'll cite anybody that does that and actually ask for restitution charges. But we actually offer a reward. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation offers a reward, and we actually had some private individuals that wanted to offer rewards as well this year for a conviction of whoever poached the elk.
Well, I'm very appreciative of that. I think that's a great program, and I'm excited to see what it does for our state, just to bring back some of the natural beauty that we've had at certain times. The other thing I wanted to just thank you guys, because I know you went to the citizens of the state and asked them to give input on for the 23-24 hunting season and changes that we could make to make it a better experience for everybody. So that doesn't happen very often, government. We just make decisions and go on, but thank you for the citizen input.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair Leader.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Gant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here today. It's always a pleasure to have y'all come before us. And the line of questioning I've got today is around chronic wasting disease and the efforts that are ongoing to combat that here. And I read through several, trying to educate myself on where we're at, but I still have some questions here. And then since 2018, I know that TWRA has been actively involved in the surveillance and the prevention of CWD here in Tennessee. And And I noticed that as I was reading through some of the materials in 2020, TWRA received 610,000 federal expansion, placing 10 wildlife professionals in the field to help mitigate this. And according to one of the press releases from November of 23, it looks like CWD was detected in Lewis County recently. I think that's correct. And if I'm wrong, correct me. And making this the third county in Middle Tennessee, where hunters are, I guess, subject to the CWD requirements that we had in West Tennessee. So my questions are, and I'll start with the first two and end with a third, is how has this federal expansion aided the efforts in the CWD mitigation, and have these funds been utilized to solely pay for those 10 additional officer positions?
Okay, you'll take them one at a time. Yes, sir. I'm not aware of any federal funding that we've received for positions. Now, I know the 10 positions you're talking about, we went and asked for those to help with the fight on CWD, but we incurred those out of our general fund budget. I'm thinking that maybe if you're seeing a guideline amount in there for federal funding, it's probably been for research purposes. All the expenditures that have been expended at this time have come out of TWRA's funds to be able to pay for the fight on CWD. We do get federal funds. There's a little bit of federal dollars that come about every year, and typically we're working with the University of Tennessee and other universities to do research projects with those.
Okay, Madam Chair, if I have one more question. So does TWRA utilize any of its agency funding to combat the CWD and management of it?
Yes, sir. It's all
What-
agency funding. We're spending to the tune of about $2 million a year out of license.
sorry, how
dollars.
much?
About $2 million a year.
Okay.
To be able to combat CWD, and that's all coming from TWRA's dollars, from TWRA's general fund dollars.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you so much. Thank you,
We
Madam Chair.
built,
I guess the sort of a elephant in the room kind of question. We had CWD in West Tennessee. There were a lot of efforts made to contain it, to mitigate it. Now, it's moved. We have instances in Middle Tennessee. So is there any best practice? Is there anything out there that we can do differently that will have a better outcome? Or is it a question of stopping it, or it's just a question of slowing it down? It's inevitable that it's going to spread.
Madam Chair, we're going to blame that Lewis County positive on Alabama if we can, but I'll answer your questions. Yes, ma'am. I mean, the biggest thing that we can do is keep our hunters engaged. They are the best tool that we have to slow the spread of the disease. It's inevitable. It's going to move. We've enacted several practices to be able to slow the spread, and I'll give you one example. So Fayette and Hardeman County in your district is obviously where the epicenter. It started there. And it's grown. We're sampling about 20,000 animals. This is why the cost is so high. We provide this as a service to our hunters. So our hunters this is a free service to them to be able to get their deer tested if they want to do so. We offer voucher programs. If they shoot a deer, it tests positive, they can get a $75 voucher to have another deer processed. We actually have a earn a buck program. If they shoot one, they can shoot another because the bucks transmit it the most, especially older age class bucks moving around. But inevitably, it's probably going to spread, and it's encroaching from other sides of our state. North Carolina's got it. Virginia's got it. So it's not in Tennessee on that side of the state yet, and we're trying to keep it contained. And so example, if we have one that pops up in, say, Henry County, which we do, we have 2 positives in Henry County now. That's the farthest northern county we have in West Tennessee. We will do what's called targeted removal. And so we work with USDA Wildlife Services, and they'll go out with willing landowners only, and they'll do targeted removal. So they'll try to remove 300 deer around that spark. We call it a spark because it's kind of jumped up there. And we'll try to remove as many deer as we can off the landscape around that area to try to keep it from moving through those family units. So several things that we're doing to try to slow the spread of it.
And I guess, have there been any instances where we know that it's gotten into the human food chain?
Oh, ma'am, there's no known cases at this time of where that's moved over to humans. And remember this, it's been around since 1950. It's fairly new to our state, but it's been around a long time.
Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Here, this is just a question. Is that transmittable? I don't know what the word would be, from whitetail population into the elk population?
It can be, yes, sir.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
typically transmitted through congregating deer, through feces, urine, and then deer-to-deer transmission. That's the way that it's typically transmitted. That's why we've put a lot of restrictions on baiting and carcass transport restrictions. We don't want to concentrate deer to one area. That's why that's one of the other things we do in those areas is we don't allow feeding, and we have certain transport restrictions to keep you from transporting out of those known zones where we have positive animals.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director and your team, thank you very much for all you do. I want to talk about the boating fund, and you've got it broken down 40 on the slide 3, I believe, 47% boating registration, 15% federal reimbursement, 38% gasoline tax. And on the questionnaire you answered for us, you've included boat registrations, fuel taxes, and fines all in one line on the questionnaire. And we had budgeted for the 22-23 year, $8.3 million. We actually collected $10.7 million in 22-23, budgeted 23-24 for this year, about $11.6 million. I'm going down that line asking about the gasoline tax portion of it itself. Is that a sustainable source of revenue? Is that something that we're seeing grow, rise, registrations versus the gasoline tax, and breaking down to the smaller details that make up the boating fund?
I'm going to take a piece of that, and then I'm going to look over at our budget chairman, Mr. Ken Tarkington, to take some of the rest of it. But I'll remind you, one of the reasons you see the increase is there was a bill that was passed last year or 2 years ago, Mr. Ken, but it came into effect this year. We grant funds. You all asked us to be able to do that, to grant a portion of the marine fuel tax. I think it's 0.88%. I think is what it is that we grant to marinas. So I think we've sent out about 67 of those to different marinas across the state, and each one is about $25,000. So that's some of that money. I don't know if I hit on everything. Ken, hit on the other parts of that, if you will, or Frank.
Yes, sir. Ken Tarkington, Budget Chief. I believe you asked about the income from in boating from the registrations. And what we've seen up until this year is since COVID is a slow decline in number of boat registrations. This year, they've come back. And what we're looking at is, now this is for the first 6 months of this fiscal year, is somewhere around a 10% increase in those collections. So that's looking good, and it's just the participation of people getting out there and enjoying the lakes and streams.
Chairman Hawk.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tarkington. I just wanted you to get in the conversation. That's why I asked the question. So I'm glad to have you there. I and greatly appreciate the marina funding. I think that's tremendous that we're partnering with our marinas to do that. And I've got several folks that are thankful for that. I guess my question is more specifically related to the motor fuel tax portion of that. And I know that some of the motor fuel taxes had got swept away in other parts of the budget, and I just want to make sure that the fair share is coming to TWRA on those motor fuel taxes. So I'm just wanting to ensure that the dollars are going to the right place. Number two, I'm thinking about aquatic vessels. Is there any type of push on aquatic vessels to go away from petroleum products? Is there some type of are these vehicles going a different direction, like the conversation is about land vehicles? And I pose that to you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I've not heard anything about getting away from conventional vessels. I'm sure there's probably some thought of doing that. As far as the tax itself, yes, I think it's going to the correct place and to the correct fund. It comes to wildlife resources, but as the director said, we have 3 different major slots that it goes into, and this does go into the boating fund.
Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, gentlemen. How are you? Good to see you again. As we go through these budget hearings, we're mindful that, revenues are not necessarily keeping up with projections. And so wanted to ask you a question about in your proposed budget, there's a little over $3.5 million for increased employee salaries. But Also, in your questionnaire, I think there's 37 vacancies reported for both 22 and 23. So, and the number increased to 54 vacancies in 24. So, a couple of questions. What areas of the agency are you all having trouble filling these vacancies, or is this something that's across the board? And then also, 10 positions have been vacant for longer than a year. So, what's the plan there? What are y'all working on?
Answer is we're doing that on purpose. This
Okay.
hit us hard when this compensation package come out and we had no prior knowledge of it. So over the course of a couple of years, it's hit us to the tune of about 5.5 million. And then we just got this 3% increase that we just found out about last week. So we have kept those positions open on purpose. And as we have folks retiring, we're not filling some of those vacancies to try to make up the difference in these costs. That was a pretty good lick to us for an agency that's not getting appropriated. We fall under all the same state protocols as far as being mandated to give those raises, and our employees deserve that. We're giving those employees those raises, but it's hitting us for a pretty good lick, and we're tapping into our reserves for that. So we've left those vacant.
So,
President Barrett?
thank you, Chair Lady. So is this a long-term plan then, or is the department planning on doing away with these positions, or are you going to keep listing them as open positions and eventually try to come back and refill them? And to build off of that, I guess maybe I should flip this, and the first question would be, how is that affecting your ability to cover the tasks that the department needs to be covering?
We're no different than everybody else. Obviously, we haven't had a fee increase since 2015. And so we're operating at the same capacity. We are trying to acquire land because we want future generations to be able to have that, to be able to hunt. So we're using the wetlands dollars to be able to acquire tracts when we can, to add places for sportsmen to be able to use later on. But really, we're still doing everything that we were doing other than those 10 positions from CWD with the same amount of bodies. And it's put a strain on our folks. We're doing the best we can to try to provide our hunters and anglers with what they're used to, but also having to hold some of these positions open because of that budget.
Thank you for the answer. Appreciate it.
All right. I see no additional questions. Thank you all again for being here. I'm neither a hunter nor a fisherman, but I have friends and relatives who are, and I know that protecting that, and you don't just, what TWRA does is not just providing opportunities for those kind of outdoor experiences, but also you mentioned protecting habitat, protecting species, and all of that, which is important to the future generations of Tennesseans, that they can have access to the same things that sometimes we just take for granted. So we appreciate the work that you all do. And I know Mr. Bell has to have the last word, so let me just go ahead and recognize him.
Madam Chair, just wanted to remind everybody of the legislative breakfast this coming Thursday morning on the 8th floor from 7 to 8:30. One of the things that makes us unique, we are governed by a commission. Some of those commissioners are appointed by your speaker, some by the lieutenant governor, some by the governor. They will all be at the breakfast Thursday morning, so you can come by and meet them. I'm sorry?
You're not going to make us eat bear, are you?
No, we're not going to feed you bear this time. I'm going to feed you Chick-fil-A, and your buddy Mr. Devaney from Chattanooga will be there. He's one of our commissioners. So we want to be sure to invite you, get you to come by and meet all the commission members Thursday morning.
Right. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for providing Chick-fil-A instead of bear sausage. I, for one, appreciate that greatly. Without objection, we are back in session, and that does complete our calendar and our budget hearings for today. And remember, you're excited to hear this, but we will begin again in the morning at 8 o'clock here in this room. So be there, be square. We'll see you at 8 o'clock for continued hearings. Without objection, we're adjourned. Oh.